After I found out my wife wanted to be the surrogate for her sister and brother-in-law. I warned her not to do it, but she went ahead anyway, insisting, "It's my body, my choice." Now, she and her family are begging me, but I've made my stance clear: not my baby, not my problem. You ever wake up one morning, stretch, yawn, sip your coffee, and think, yeah, I might just have this life thing under control? That was me, Grant Miller, suburban husband, father of 3, professional insurance paper pusher, and proud owner of a minivan that smelled permanently of goldfish crackers and regret. Life was good. Not Hollywood good, just sitcom rerun good. Predictable, slightly underwhelming, but steady. Lydia, my wife, had a calendar for everything: soccer practices, PTA meetings, dentist appointments, even the recycling schedule. She ran our house like a mid-tier startup with no HR department. And me? I was the employee of the month every damn month, mostly because there were no other applicants. 6 years of marriage had given us a rhythm, like a well-trained band. I'd go to work, grind through numbers, come home, pretend to understand second-grade math homework, and fall asleep halfway through a Netflix show we'd promised to watch together. Our kids, Sophie, age 8 going on 80, and the 5-year-old twins, Ryan and Ellie, were chaos wrapped in juice boxes. Sophie was the philosopher. She once told me, "Daddy, you look tired because you think too much," which is adorable until you realize she's right, and you start questioning your entire existence. The twins were tiny tornadoes in sneakers, Ellie the brains, Ryan the daredevil. Between the 3 of them, the noise level in our home was somewhere between an airport runway and a metal concert. And yet, it was perfect in its own unfiltered way. I'd walk through the door after work, greeted by a mix of hugs, homework complaints, and the smell of whatever Lydia was cooking. Usually something that involved chicken, because apparently that's the only protein families in the suburbs are legally allowed to eat. "How was your day?" she'd ask, smiling that smile that still somehow made me forget the unpaid car insurance bills on my desk. "Oh, I'd reply. "Same circus, different monkeys." Then we'd tag-team bedtime like Navy SEALs. One bathes, one reads, one pretends to have patience. Once the kids were finally asleep, or at least convincingly faking it, we'd collapse on the couch, stare at each other, and exchange that silent married look that says, we made it another day without anyone dying or setting something on fire. That's real romance right there. Our friends called us the stable couple, which, in married people language, means predictable enough not to require therapy, but boring enough not to invite to parties. And honestly, I wore that title like a badge. I didn't need excitement. I had a mortgage, a Costco membership, and a coffee maker that actually worked. Stability was sexy. At least, that's what I told myself every time I folded laundry at midnight. Lydia and I weren't perfect, but we were fine. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our shared exhaustion. She'd hum while cooking. I'd sneak bites before dinner and pretend I didn't. We'd argue about small things, like who left the lights on or who forgot to buy milk, and make up over bigger things, like who left the lights on again. But we had love. The kind that's steady, not fireworks, quiet, not cinematic. The kind that survives cold pizza dinners and 3 a.m. baby screams. Until that one Tuesday. The Tuesday that decided peace was overrated. It started normal enough. The twins were building what they called a pillow city in the living room. Sophie was conducting a lecture on how boys are confusing, and I was trying to read an email from my boss that might as well have been written in Latin. Lydia was unusually quiet that evening. Not the "I'm tired" quiet, but the "I'm about to change your entire reality" quiet. I didn't notice it at first because she was wearing her "everything's fine" smile, the same one she used when the twins drew on the walls or when I forgot her cousin's birthday again. Dinner went as usual. Spaghetti, arguments about who got more sauce, and me trying to convince the kids that broccoli wasn't invented by villains. Then, after bedtime chaos ended and the house finally reached that rare, peaceful silence, Lydia said the words that would later haunt me. "Grant," she began, using my full name like she was a judge handing down a sentence, "we need to talk. If you're married, you know that line. It's the universal anthem of incoming chaos." "Sure," I said casually, pretending I wasn't suddenly sweating like a man on trial. "What's up?" She took a deep breath, looked down at her tea, and said, "You might want to sit for this." "I'm already sitting," I said. Then maybe lie down, she added, deadly serious. That's when I should have run. I didn't, of course, because I'm an idiot who thought communication was a good idea. So I leaned in, trying to look supportive while mentally preparing for something like, I crashed the car, or I adopted another cat. I had no idea that what she was about to say would make both those options sound like winning the lottery. Before the reveal, let me explain something about Lydia. She's calm under pressure. Too calm. Like defusing a bomb while sipping chamomile tea calm. Meanwhile, I'm the kind of guy who panics when the Wi-Fi drops below 2 bars. So when she looked at me with that serene, Buddha-level composure, I knew I was screwed. But that's the thing about comfort. You don't realize how fragile it is until it gets shattered by someone who says your name like they're narrating your downfall. Looking back, all the warning signs were there. The late-night phone calls with her sister Hannah. The secretive texts she'd quickly minimize when I walked into the room. The sudden obsession with vitamins and wellness routines. I just thought she was trying to get healthy or start an MLM, which honestly would have been better. But no, Tuesday had other plans. I've been thinking about something for a while, she said, tapping her cup nervously. I smiled. Okay, shoot. Promise you'll stay calm. That's when my left eye started twitching. You're scaring me, Lydia. She smiled gently, the kind of smile dentists give right before they drill without anesthesia. It's nothing bad, she said, which, spoiler alert, was a lie. I've made a big decision. I raised an eyebrow. Okay, about what? She opened her mouth to speak, and then closed it again, like the words were stuck in traffic. It's really something I need you to support me on. And just like that, my brain began assembling worst-case scenarios faster than a conspiracy theorist on caffeine. Was she leaving me? Joining a cult? Opening a TikTok account? I didn't know. But her tone screamed, brace yourself. Grant, she said finally, I'm going to be a surrogate. I blinked. Once. Twice. My brain did the Windows blue screen thing. Sorry, you're what? She nodded solemnly, like she'd just announced world peace. A surrogate. For Hannah and Mark. My mouth opened, but no words came out. It felt like I'd just been hit by emotional whiplash. Hannah, her twin sister. Mark, her twin sister's husband. My brother-in-law. And my wife wanted to, what? Have their baby? Inside our house. Using our fridge? My coffee went cold. My heartbeat didn't. Lydia kept talking, completely oblivious to the fact that my brain was screaming like a fire alarm. They've been trying for years, she said. Hannah's gone through so much. This is the least I can do. I nodded slowly, pretending to process, while my inner voice yelled, abort mission. She's lost it. I forced a laugh, thinking maybe this was one of those pranks she and Hannah loved doing. Huh, that's funny, I said. You got me. Good one. But Lydia didn't laugh. She stared, unblinking. I'm serious, Grant. That's when my stomach dropped faster than my paycheck on tax day. I tried logic first. Okay, but did you, think about how insane this sounds? It's not insane, she said defensively. It's selfless. Selfless. I repeated. Honey, selfless is donating blood, not 9 months of your uterus to your sister's marriage. She frowned. It's my body, my choice. Oh good, I muttered. We're bringing slogans into this. I wanted to shout, argue, throw a pillow, something, but all I could do was sit there, trying to comprehend how the woman I shared a mortgage with had just turned our domestic peace into a ticking time bomb. And the worst part? She looked so damn calm about it. That was the moment, though I didn't know it yet, that everything began to crack. The laughter, the routine, the sense of safety, all of it started to unravel. Because once someone drops a bomb like that on a Tuesday night, you don't just go back to normal. You can't. So I just sat there, staring at her, nodding like an idiot while my world quietly rearranged itself. Life was good, I had thought. Turns out, life was just good at lying. When your wife drops the phrase, it's my body, my choice, right after announcing she's carrying her brother-in-law's baby, you don't need caffeine. You need an exorcist. I sat there on the couch, blinking like my brain was buffering. Lydia sipped her tea like she was discussing paint samples, not the destruction of domestic peace. So let me get this straight, I said finally, rubbing my temples. You're planning to grow another man's baby inside you, in this house, while our kids think you just had a big lunch? She gave me that calm, saint-in-training smile. You're being dramatic. Dramatic? Lady, I pay Netflix $10 a month for drama. I don't need a front row seat in my own living room. Apparently, she and her twin sister Hannah had been scheming for months. Hannah and her husband Mark, Mr. and Mrs. Fertility Issues, had tried everything. IVF, prayer candles, probably goat sacrifices for all I know. Then St. Lydia here offered her uterus like it was a gift card. It's what sisters do, she said proudly. Mark and Hannah trust me. Yeah, I muttered, because what every marriage needs is a shared pregnancy. She didn't even flinch, just stirred her tea and said, "They're family, Grant. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Oh, trust me, I wasn't making it hard. Reality was doing a pretty good job on its own. I tried to laugh it off at first, because denial is cheaper than therapy. Okay, I said, forcing a chuckle. So you're kidding, right? Like, this is one of those influencer prank videos? Should I look for the hidden camera? She blinked. It's real. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling fan, and thought, God, if this is a test, I'm failing it. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I asked. She sighed. Because you'd react like this. Like a sane person? Like a man who doesn't understand empathy. That one hit low. Oh, I understand empathy, I said. I just didn't realize it involved letting my wife play baby factory for her brother-in-law. She stood, crossed her arms, and said, "You're twisting it." No, I'm trying to untwist it. You've tied logic into a pretzel. She gave me the look. You know the one. The look every married man recognizes as "don't you dare mansplain my moral high ground." Grant, she said, you're overreacting. This doesn't change anything between us. I nearly choked on my own disbelief. Doesn't change anything? Lydia, you're literally introducing a fourth child who's genetically not mine, and I'm supposed to treat this like you just bought a new blender? At this point, my internal monologue sounded like a courtroom transcript. Exhibit A, a husband's confusion. Exhibit B, a wife with zero remorse. Exhibit C, a future episode of Dr. Phil waiting to happen. I tried reasoning with her again, hoping logic would sneak through whatever force field she was using. So what? You just carry the baby, hand it off to them, and life goes back to normal? No side effects, no trauma, no awkward family dinners. She shrugged. That's the plan. Oh, perfect, I said. Maybe next Thanksgiving we can all share placenta recipes. Silence. Deadly silence. The kind where you can hear your own heartbeat asking if divorce lawyers offer payment plans. Lydia sat down again and said softly, I thought you'd be proud of me. Proud. My wife was acting like she'd won a humanitarian award. Lydia, I said, trying not to shout, you can't just make decisions like this without me. It's my body. And it's our marriage. I snapped. Or was that not part of the consultation packet? She gave me that pity smile that wives use when they've mentally added you to the obsolete husband category. You'll understand someday, she said. No, I'll be understanding today. Specifically, understanding how to move out before this circus gets a sequel. That finally got a reaction. You're not being supportive, she said sharply. Of what exactly? Your campaign for sainthood. I stood up, pacing, because if I didn't move, I was going to implode. How far along is this insanity? I asked. We start the medical process next month, she said casually, like she was scheduling a pedicure. I laughed, one of those laughs that sounds way too close to crying. So, you've been plotting this for months, and I'm just the guy paying the electric bill while you make history? It's not plotting, she said. It's compassion. No, I corrected. Compassion is donating to charity. This is volunteering for emotional bankruptcy. She sighed and grabbed her phone, clearly done with the conversation. I'm tired, Grant. We can talk tomorrow. Oh no, I said. We're not sleeping this off like a bad burrito. We're talking now. She looked up, eyebrows raised. What's there to talk about? I've made my choice. And there it was, the sentence that would echo in my head for months. I've made my choice. Not we. Not us. I. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a pregnancy. It was about control. Lydia had decided our marriage was a democracy where she held all the votes. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, listening to her steady breathing beside me while my brain screamed into the void. Every creak of the house sounded like the universe laughing. Even the dog looked at me like, Bro, you in danger. I barely slept. When morning came, Lydia was up early, humming while packing school lunches like nothing happened. The twins were arguing about Pop-Tarts, Sophie was lecturing them on sugar content, and I was standing there wondering if I was the crazy one. At work, I tried to focus on spreadsheets, but every cell blurred into the word surrogate. My coworker Darren noticed. "You okay, man? You look like you just saw a ghost." "Worse," I said. "I saw my future." He chuckled. "Wife giving you trouble." "You could say that," I muttered. "She's pregnant." "Congrats. With another man's baby." He froze mid-sip of coffee. "Oh, what?" "It's her sister's husband," I explained flatly. "She's being a surrogate." He blinked. "Is that legal?" "Apparently," I said. "But I'm considering making it illegal in this zip code." Darren whistled. "Damn, man. That's modern." "Yeah," I said, "modern like nuclear waste." For the next few days, Lydia acted like nothing had changed. She went about her routines, talking to Hannah and Mark constantly. I'd walk into a room, hear their names, and my blood pressure would jump like it was doing CrossFit. One night, I came home to find them all sitting at our dining table, Hannah glowing with gratitude, Mark looking sheepish, Lydia smiling like the Virgin Mary of suburbia. "Grant," she said brightly, "we were just finalizing the clinic details." I froze in the doorway. "Oh, great. You're using my dining room for corporate meetings now." Mark stood, hand extended. "Hey, man, I just want you to know how much this means to us." I stared at his hand like it was radioactive. "Yeah," I said, "I bet it does." They all laughed awkwardly. Hannah dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "We're so blessed to have Lydia," she said. "She's giving us the greatest gift." I looked at Lydia. "Funny, she's giving me the greatest migraine." Lydia frowned. "Grant, please." No, I said. "I'm genuinely curious. Does the clinic offer husband counseling? Or am I supposed to just drink my feelings?" Hannah started crying. Of course she did. And Mark patted her back. Lydia shot me a death glare that could melt steel. "Can you not make everything about you?" she hissed. "Everything was about us," I said quietly. Until it became about them. Dinner that night was pure theater. Lydia served lasagna. I served sarcasm. Mark talked about baby names. "We like the name Hope," he said. "It symbolizes new beginnings." I grinned. "How about betrayal? That's got a nice ring." Nobody laughed. Hannah sniffled. Lydia muttered something about toxic energy. I raised my glass. "To Hope, or whatever you name this disaster." After they left, Lydia unleashed hell. "You embarrassed me," she shouted. "Good," I said. "At least now you know how it feels." She started crying, saying I was cruel, selfish, unsupportive. I just stood there, tired beyond words. "You made a choice, Lydia," I said. "You chose to carry their baby. Don't expect me to carry your feelings too." She didn't reply, just stared at me like she was realizing for the first time that I wasn't going to play the role of loyal background husband anymore. That night, she slept in the guest room. The silence between us was heavier than anything the twins could ever break. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling again, thinking about how quickly love turns into something unrecognizable. 6 years of marriage, 3 kids, and one life-changing bombshell. And suddenly, I was the villain in her story. By the weekend, she'd told her parents, her book club, and probably the mailman. People started looking at me differently, like I was the jerk who didn't appreciate his wife's noble act. Even Mrs. Whitmore, our elderly neighbor, cornered me at the mailbox. "Your wife's doing such a beautiful thing," she said, smiling sweetly. "Yeah," I replied. "Beauty really is in the eye of the gaslit." She blinked, confused. "What's that, dear?" "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just marveling at modern family planning." By Sunday night, I'd stopped pretending everything was fine. I sat in the garage, sipping cheap whiskey, scrolling through divorce attorneys on my phone like it was a dating app. Lydia poked her head in. "Are you really this angry?" "Angry," I said. "No. Angry would be if you wrecked the car. This is betrayal with a smile." She exhaled. "You'll see, Grant. This will make sense someday." I laughed, drained my glass, and said, "Yeah, probably right after the apocalypse." She walked away without another word, her calm footsteps fading down the hall. I watched her go, realizing that somewhere between For Better or Worse and Surrogate for my sister, the us part of our marriage had quietly died. And all I could think was, Tuesday nights should be illegal. You ever live with someone who's pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not? That was my house, our suburban war zone disguised by throw pillows and the faint scent of Glade ocean breeze. On the surface, things looked normal, the kids running around, the dog barking at air, and Lydia humming in the kitchen like she hadn't detonated an emotional nuke in our marriage. But underneath, you could cut the tension with a butter knife. A dull one. After Lydia's, "I'm gonna be a surrogate" bombshell, the house vibe shifted from cozy sitcom to prestige drama. We didn't yell, not yet. We just started communicating through tone and appliance volume. The dishwasher door slammed like a judge's gavel. The microwave beeped aggressively, like it was tattling on someone. Even the fridge sounded judgmental every time it opened, probably because it now contained boxes of fertility hormone injections stacked neatly next to the kids' juice boxes. I opened it one morning, half asleep, looking for milk, and found a neatly labeled container. Ovarian stimulation kit. I muttered, "Well, nothing says breakfast like biochemical betrayal." The kids, bless their innocent chaos, had no idea what was going on. Sophie kept asking why Mommy had science medicine in the fridge. I said, "She's experimenting." Not technically a lie. The twins didn't care, they just wanted pancakes. Meanwhile, Lydia walked around like she'd joined a cult of calmness. Every morning, she'd stick herself with those hormone shots, and then make smoothies like she was on a wellness retreat. "These help balance things," she said once. "Oh, great," I replied. "Maybe they come with a husband replacement patch too?" She didn't laugh. That was the new normal. Me joking, her not laughing. It's weird how silence becomes louder than words when love starts packing its bags. Work became my escape. Even Darren noticed how fast I started volunteering for overtime. "Dude, you trying to impress the boss or avoid your wife?" he asked one afternoon. "Both," I said. "One's impossible, the other's necessary." He chuckled until I added, "Guess which is which?" He didn't ask again. Every day, I'd leave early, come home late, just to avoid sitting through another episode of the Surrogate Diaries, my wife's noble journey of emotional arson. Then came the clinic talk. Lydia sat me down one night. Again with the serious voice, again with the tea. "Grant, the transfer is scheduled for next week." "Transfer?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "What are we transferring? Money, assets, or sanity?" She sighed. "The embryo, Grant. Try to be mature." "Oh, sorry," I said. "I left my maturity next to the part where you told me you were turning our house into a maternity ward." She ignored that and slid some papers across the table. "I just need you to sign these consent forms." I stared at them like they were radioactive. "You need my signature for this circus?" "It's just a formality," she said sweetly. "They require spousal acknowledgement." "Oh, acknowledgement? Then consider this my acknowledgement. I acknowledge that my life is now a reality show without the paycheck." I didn't sign. Instead, I called my lawyer friend Tom, the same guy who helped me sue my old landlord for structural dishonesty. Long story involving a collapsing ceiling fan. Tom listened, then exhaled so loudly I thought he'd fainted. "Dude," he said, "document everything. Everything. Every text, every receipt, every medical charge that touches your joint account. She's making unilateral decisions, and that can bite you later." I scribbled notes like a paranoid accountant. "So you're saying my marriage is now a legal liability?" "It's been once since you said I do," he said. I laughed, because it hurt too much not to. From then on, I became a domestic detective. I started snapping photos of bills, noting the cost of every clinic expense she charged to our credit card. Needles, vitamins, therapy sessions, gas to the fertility center, it all added up. I created a folder on my laptop labeled Surrogate Saga, Evidence. Paranoia? Maybe. But I wasn't about to go down without receipts. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake next to her, listening to her phone buzz with late-night texts from Hannah or Mark. Every time she smiled at her screen, my chest tightened. Once I caught a glimpse. "So proud of you, Red Heart," from Mark. I wanted to throw her phone out the window and follow it with a flaming copy of our wedding vows. Instead, I just stared at the ceiling, whispering, "You chose this, Grant. You married an idealist with Wi-Fi." By week 3 of Operation Uterus, Lydia had turned into a full-blown fertility influencer. She talked about hormone levels, implantation rates, and uterine lining thickness like she was giving a TED Talk to ghosts. I couldn't even eat dinner without hearing medical jargon. "Progesterone levels look good," she'd say while passing the salt. I'd reply, "Mine too. Thanks for asking." She didn't laugh at that either. It was around that time that I stopped calling her LYD and started calling her Lydia again. It's funny how nicknames die before relationships do. I also moved to the guest room, under the pretext of early work mornings. Truth was, I couldn't sleep next to someone who thought embryo transfer belonged in a family conversation. The kids noticed, of course. Sophie asked, "Daddy, why are you sleeping in the other room?" I said, "Because Daddy snores." She squinted. "Mommy says you don't." "Then Mommy's lying," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The tension finally boiled over during one of her clinic visits. I came home early, expecting quiet. Instead, the house smelled like disinfectant and optimism. Lydia was on a video call with Hannah and Mark, showing them her progress. There were charts, graphs, even a slideshow. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching this bizarre science fair presentation happening in my living room. "And this," Lydia said, pointing to her stomach, "is where it'll all happen." I couldn't help myself. "Oh good, a guided tour. Should we charge admission?" Hannah's face froze on screen. Mark awkwardly adjusted his headset. Lydia turned around, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Grant, we're in the middle of something." "Yeah," I said, "so am I," a mental breakdown. She hung up the call and glared. "Why are you being like this?" "Because this is insane," I shouted, finally letting it out. "You're treating this like some charity marathon when it's a 9-month family implosion. I told you it's not like that." "Then what's it like, Lydia?" "Because from where I'm standing, you're volunteering our marriage for demolition." She flinched but held her ground. "You're being selfish. You're being reckless." I shot back. "You're turning me into a stranger in my own house." "It's my body, and it's my house," I yelled. "So maybe we should respect both." That was the night she cried. Not little sniffles, ugly sobs. And I didn't comfort her. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't. I was too busy holding myself together with caffeine and sarcasm. When she finally went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at a half-empty whiskey bottle, wondering when love had turned into a business negotiation. A few days later, she stopped talking to me altogether. Communication became purely functional. "The kids need cereal. Bills are due. Dinner's on the counter." Each sentence felt like a line from a hostage note. The only warmth in that house came from the oven. Even the dogs started sleeping in the hallway, probably to avoid picking sides. Then one afternoon, I came home to find a receipt on the counter from the clinic. $3,200. Procedure deposit. Charged to our joint account. That was the final straw. I texted Tom, "You were right. Documented." He replied, "Good. Keep stacking evidence." I felt like a man preparing for war while my enemy hummed lullabies upstairs. When I confronted her that night, I kept my voice calm. "You used our joint money. It's for a good cause," she said without looking up from her phone. "You forged my name, Lydia." That got her attention. "Don't exaggerate." "I'm not exaggerating. I saw the form. My signature looks like it was drawn by a drunk toddler." I had to grant. "You wouldn't cooperate." "Cooperate," I said, laughing bitterly. "You mean endorse your midlife experiment?" "Sorry, I missed the recruitment email." She threw down her phone. "You're impossible. And you're delusional," I said. "You think this is empowerment, but it's just betrayal dressed up as compassion." She stared at me, eyes full of tears and defiance. "If you can't support me, maybe you should leave." I nodded slowly. Maybe I should. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on the porch, watching the streetlights flicker, feeling like the last sane man in a neighborhood built on pretense. People think marriages end in shouting and slammed doors. Sometimes, they just die quietly, smothered by self-righteousness and silence. The next morning, Lydia acted like nothing happened. She packed school lunches, kissed the kids, and left for another appointment. I just stood in the kitchen, holding my coffee, staring at her car pulling out of the driveway. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. Document everything, trust nothing. When I told Tom later, he said, "You're smart, man. You're protecting yourself." "Feels more like I'm losing myself," I muttered. He sighed. "That's marriage sometimes. A slow legal lesson." And just like that, my home stopped feeling like home. It became evidence. Photos, receipts, texts. Every corner whispered a reminder that love, once solid, had turned fragile. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry anymore. Just numb. The kind of numb that comes when the person you love starts looking at you like a roadblock instead of a partner. I looked around one evening. Kids laughing in the backyard, TV humming in the background, Lydia scrolling her phone on the couch. and realized this wasn't peace anymore. It was polite warfare, a ceasefire with paperwork. And that's when it hit me. Marriage wasn't about love anymore. It was about evidence. If you ever want to test the structural limits of your patience, try having your in-laws over while your wife is carrying her brother-in-law's baby. I wouldn't recommend it unless you enjoy slow, painful character development. About a week after Lydia's medical miracle officially kicked off, my house turned into a maternity lounge sponsored by Pure Audacity. Hannah and Mark started visiting like they were on a loyalty program. Monday, here. Wednesday, still here. Friday, bringing snacks and chaos. My living room wasn't mine anymore. It was the nesting area. That's what Hannah called it. I called it Ground Zero. Grant, Lydia said one afternoon, voice full of that performative calm people use when they're about to do something stupid. We need to make them comfortable. Comfortable, I said. They already treat this place like an Airbnb with free emotional labor. Hannah piped up from the couch. It's just temporary, Grant. We want to be close during the pregnancy. How close? I asked. Like emotionally close or physically close enough to steal my Wi-Fi password again? Mark laughed nervously, trying to play peacemaker. Hey man, relax. We're all family here. I turned to him, smiled, and said, not after this baby's born, we're not. He blinked. Lydia glared at me so hard I swear my ancestors felt it. Stop being immature, she hissed. Immature? Lady, I was living in a soap opera I didn't audition for. I was surviving. Hannah started crying. Of course, she's a professional in that department. I just don't understand why you're being so cold about this, she sobbed, clutching Lydia's hand. This means the world to us. You're welcome, I muttered. Glad to provide the world's weirdest baby shower venue. Lydia snapped. Grant. What? I said, shrugging. Do you want honesty or husband of the year silence? At that point, I realized no one in that room was on my team. Not even the dog, who was wagging his tail at Hannah like she was St. Francis of Assisi. So I retreated to the kitchen, where I could mutter sarcastic commentary to the toaster without judgment. That's when Lydia's parents decided to get involved. Because, of course, they did. There's a universal law that says when something insane happens in a family, the in-laws must arrive to make it worse. They came over that weekend, full of disapproval and passive-aggressive energy. Her mom, Sandra, walked in carrying a casserole and moral superiority. We heard about the tension, she said, eyes already scanning me like a TSA agent. We just want to make sure you're supporting Lydia during this beautiful time. Beautiful? I was living in a hostage situation with snack breaks. Her dad, Frank, was quieter, the kind of quiet that means he's judging you while calculating your net worth. Son, he said, patting my shoulder like a cop giving a speeding ticket. Families should stick together. Sure, I said, preferably in separate houses. We all sat in the living room. Again, my living room. And Sandra immediately started cooing over Lydia's glow. I almost choked. Glow, I said. That's the reflection off the hormone syringes in the fridge. No one laughed. Not even the dog this time. Sandra leaned forward, clasping her pearls like she was about to deliver a sermon. Grant, you need to understand. What Lydia's doing is an act of love. For who? I asked. Because I checked our marriage license, and there's no clause about womb rentals. Lydia's jaw dropped. That's disgusting. So is betrayal, I said. But here we are. Frank frowned. Watch your tone, son. Then tell your daughter to watch her decisions. I shot back. Sandra gasped like I'd slapped the Pope. She's being selfless, and you're being cruel, she said. I smiled politely. Ma'am, with all due respect, she's selfless with my money and my sanity. Lydia snapped. Enough. The room went silent, except for the faint hum of my dignity leaving my body. They stayed for dinner. Of course they did. And every bite of food tasted like resentment. Lydia had made lasagna, Hannah brought salad, and I brought sarcasm. At one point, Mark raised a toast. To family, he said, smiling like a man who'd never read the room. I raised my glass too. To boundaries, I said. He pretended not to hear me. After they left, Lydia turned to me, arms crossed. You embarrassed me. Good, I said. At least now we're even. She threw the dish towel onto the counter. You're impossible, Grant. Why can't you just be supportive? Because, Lydia, support implies agreement. And I don't agree with turning our house into a womb service. She glared. You're heartless. Maybe, I said. but at least I'm not delusional. That night, she didn't speak to me. I went to bed alone, again, and honestly, the silence was starting to feel like peace. I'd rather hear nothing than hear her talk about embryo transfers like she was describing a weekend getaway. The next morning, I woke up to find Hannah and Mark in the kitchen, again, talking about stroller colors. We're thinking beige, Hannah said. It's gender neutral. So is betrayal, I muttered. Lydia shot me a warning look. Grant. What? I said, sipping my coffee. I'm just participating in the conversation. Mark chuckled nervously. He's just joking. I'm really not, I said. By noon, I'd had enough. I grabbed my keys, muttered something about needing air, and escaped to the one place that still made sense, the hardware store. There's something healing about staring at power tools when your life's falling apart. You can't fix emotional damage, but you can sure as hell price out a new drill. When I got back, the house looked like an HGTV episode gone wrong. Baby catalogs were spread across the table, Lydia and Hannah were debating nursery colors, and Mark was assembling a crib. In my living room. What the hell is this? I asked. Lydia turned around, smiling innocently. We're just visualizing. Visualizing? I said. You mean invading? Hannah tried to mediate. It's just a few items, Grant. We're so excited. Excited? I said. Well, good news. You'll have plenty of time to be excited elsewhere, because none of this stays here. Lydia stood up. Don't be childish. Childish? I laughed. You're literally playing house with your sister's husband, and I'm the immature one. That's when Hannah started crying again. Mark looked like he wanted to crawl under the crib. Lydia pointed toward the door. Maybe you should leave. I smiled. Oh, I plan to. Right after I reclaim my damn living room. Then I walked over, picked up the crib instructions, and tossed them onto the porch. Petty? Absolutely. Therapeutic? Beyond words. Later that night, I got a call from Sandra, the mother of all meddlers. I heard what happened, she said, voice dripping with disappointment. You're pushing everyone away. You mean everyone who's trespassing in my sanity? You need to be more understanding. Of what exactly? My wife baking her brother-in-law's DNA under my roof. That's enough, she snapped. You're being hateful. And you're being naive, I replied. But hey, at least one of us is consistent. She hung up. Can't imagine why. After that, things escalated in weird, passive-aggressive ways. Lydia started labeling the baby stuff in the house with sticky notes for Hannah and Mark, like that somehow made it less insane. Hannah dropped by with fresh-baked cookies as a peace offering. I gave them to the dog. Mark tried to talk to me one evening, catching me as I mowed the lawn. Look, man, he said awkwardly. I get that this is hard for you, but this means everything to Hannah. Good for her, I said, cutting the engine. But it means nothing to me except overtime for my therapist. He tried to smile. Can we just coexist until it's over? Sure, I said, as long as coexist means you exist somewhere else. The next day, Lydia hosted a family dinner. I didn't know about it until people started showing up. Hannah and Mark, her parents, even her cousin Rebecca, who once told me I looked like the before photo in a men's health ad. I stood in the kitchen, holding a beer, wondering if anyone in this family knew how to text a warning. They all sat down, chatting happily while I sat there like a guest star in my own home. Grant, Sandra said sweetly, would you like to say grace? Sure, I said, smiling. Dear Lord, thank you for reminding me that patience is a finite resource. Lydia kicked me under the table. I didn't even flinch. I was too far gone. Halfway through dinner, Mark brought up baby names again. We were thinking something symbolic, maybe faith or hope. I nodded. Those are good. Maybe add regret for a middle name to keep it balanced. No one laughed. Lydia glared. Hannah looked like she was about to cry again. Frank said, You're cruel, son. I raised my glass. No, sir. I'm honest. There's a difference. After that, the evening crashed faster than our Wi-Fi on a stormy night. Everyone left in uncomfortable silence, muttering things like, he's lost it, and poor Lydia. As if I was the villain for refusing to clap for this family freak show. When the last car drove off, Lydia turned to me, tears in her eyes. Do you hate me? No, I said quietly. I just don't recognize you anymore. She didn't respond. She just walked upstairs and closed the door behind her. The click of that latch sounded like a verdict. I stood in the empty living room, my living room, and looked around at the leftover dishes, baby magazines, and emotional debris. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. It was aftermath. And for the first time in 6 years, I felt like a guest in my own life. By month 4, Lydia's baby bump had started showing, and so did my sarcasm. It became my primary coping mechanism, right next to caffeine and emotional detachment. You know that point in marriage where communication dies, but passive aggression thrives like a well-watered plant? Yeah, we were there. And buddy, I was flourishing. Every morning, she'd stand in front of the mirror, hands on her growing stomach, smiling like she'd just won the Nobel Prize for uterine achievement. "Look, Grant," she'd say softly, "you can see it now." I'd nod, sip my coffee, and say, "Cool. So, is that mine, or do I send a Father's Day card to Mark?" She'd roll her eyes, mutter something about my immaturity, and I'd respond with, "Hey, I'm adapting." Humor is cheaper than therapy. The house had officially become Surrogate Central. Baby books stacked on the counter. Prenatal vitamins scattered like confetti. The phrase Hannah and Mark had been uttered so many times I considered getting it engraved on the tombstone of my sanity. Meanwhile, I was one sarcastic quip away from being legally declared emotionally unavailable. But here's the thing. When your wife's body is hosting another man's future child, emotionally available isn't really on the table. I tried to care. I really did. But every time Lydia talked about her selfless journey, I felt like I was living in a bad Lifetime movie with no commercial breaks. My coworkers noticed the change first. Darren cornered me by the coffee machine one morning, whispering like we were in a spy thriller. "You good, man? You've been off." "Off?" I repeated. "Nah, I'm great. My wife's pregnant, with another guy's baby, but yeah, totally thriving." He blinked. "Oh, congratulations?" "Sure," I said. "Let's go with that." He poured his coffee slowly, clearly rethinking every friendship decision he'd ever made. "Man, that's modern." "Modern?" I laughed. "No, modern is electric cars and online banking. This is emotional tax fraud." He didn't have a response, just patted my shoulder and said, "Hang in there." "Great advice, Darren. I'll cross-stitch that on a pillow for my guest room." Home wasn't much better. Every day felt like living inside a Hallmark ad directed by Satan. Lydia kept trying to act normal. Cooking dinner, doing laundry, humming to herself, but it all felt fake, like a bad rehearsal for a play no one wanted to see. She'd ask for help carrying things, and I'd find a way to turn it into a roast. "Grant, can you bring me a pillow?" she'd call out. "Oh, sorry," I'd yell back. "I only serve babies that share my DNA." Or when she'd complain about her back hurting, I'd say, "Maybe call Mark. He seems invested in your comfort." She hated that one. The twins were too young to notice the tension, but Sophie, my oldest, picked up on everything. One night, she asked, "Daddy, why is Mommy sad all the time?" I sighed. "Because adults make bad choices sometimes." "Like when you eat ice cream for breakfast?" she asked. "Exactly," I said. Except in this case, the ice cream was biological chaos. Even our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Whitmore, decided to get involved. She was out watering her petunias one Saturday when I went to grab the mail. "I just want to say," she said sweetly, "what your wife is doing. It's so noble." "Oh, definitely," I said, forcing a grin. "She's basically the Mother Teresa of family drama." Mrs. Whitmore chuckled awkwardly. "You must be so proud." "Yeah," I said, "for everyone except her husband." She blinked, confused. "Pardon?" "Nothing," I said. "Just practicing for my next therapy session." See, this was the point where I realized sarcasm had evolved from coping mechanism to full-time hobby. It wasn't even intentional anymore. It was instinct. Lydia would breathe, and I'd respond with a punchline. It wasn't healthy, but it was satisfying. My friends called it bitterness. I called it personality development. Then came the social media post. Lydia uploaded a picture of her baby bump with the caption, "When love means giving life." Hashtag surrogacy journey, hashtag family is everything. It got 312 likes in an hour. I got heartburn. People flooded the comments. "You're amazing, Lydia. Such a strong woman. Mark and Hannah are so lucky." Meanwhile, I was sitting there on the couch, reading it like, cool, I guess I'll just tag myself as background character. One of her friends even commented, "Grant must be so supportive." I replied with a single thumbs up emoji. Petty? Yes. Worth it? Absolutely. By the time the second trimester rolled around, the sarcasm had stopped being funny even to me. Every conversation turned into a verbal boxing match. Lydia accused me of emotionally abandoning her, which was ironic, considering she'd physically volunteered for emotional eviction. One evening, after another argument about nothing and everything, she asked, "Do you even love me anymore?" I paused, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, "Define me." She burst into tears, stormed off, and slammed the door so hard the picture frames shook. I sat there sipping whiskey, whispering, "Guess that's a no." The next morning, I woke up to find a note on the counter, "Gone to Hannah's. Don't wait up." Perfect. I didn't. Instead, I invited my buddy Tom over, the lawyer/confidant/witness to my inevitable divorce. He walked in, saw the hormone boxes on the table, and said, "Man, this house feels cursed." "Yeah," I said, "like a fertility cult with better lighting." He laughed, but it was one of those laughs that ends in concern. "You documenting all this?" "Every receipt," I said proudly, pulling out a file folder. Labeled, dated, color-coded. "You're either getting divorced or an Emmy for Best Husband in a Legal Thriller," he said. "Maybe both," I replied. Around that time, I entered what I like to call my petty renaissance. If I couldn't win emotionally, I'd win logistically. For example, Lydia loved keeping the house spotless. So, I started forgetting to put things back. Little stuff, like leaving my shoes in the hallway, or the toilet seat up, or putting her favorite mug just out of reach on the top shelf. She'd huff and mutter, "You're doing this on purpose." I'd smile and say, "Everything's intentional when you've been emotionally replaced." She also loved her meditation playlist, so I replaced it one morning with a compilation of stand-up comedians roasting bad marriages. I heard her yell from the living room, "This isn't funny." "I disagree," I shouted back. "This is the funniest thing that's happened all year." She stopped speaking to me for 3 days, which was honestly the most peaceful stretch I'd had since the pregnancy started. Then came the baby shower planning. Oh, yes, she planned a baby shower. In my house. For their baby. I came home one day to find pastel balloons. It's a blessing, banners, and a giant cake that said, "For Hannah and Mark, and our angel Lydia." I just stood there, staring at it all, wondering if anyone else saw how insane this was. Lydia looked at me expectantly. "Isn't it beautiful?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, like a live-action betrayal exhibit. "Grant," she gasped, "you could at least pretend to be happy." "Oh, I am," I said. "I'm thrilled to host a celebration of how irrelevant I've become." The guests arrived, mostly her family, a few of her mom's church friends, and one of Mark's cousins who looked like he was only there for free cake. I sat in the corner, nursing a drink, watching everyone fawn over Lydia like she was some kind of sainted vessel. "You're glowing," one woman said. "Must be the hormones," I muttered. Another guest asked, "Isn't Grant the sweetest for supporting this?" Lydia smiled tightly. I raised my glass and said, "Yep, sweet as divorce court." By the end of the night, even the dog was avoiding me. Lydia pulled me aside, tears welling in her eyes. "You're ruining everything," she whispered. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just narrating." After the guests left, I helped her clean up, mostly because watching her struggle was starting to feel cruel, even for me. She wiped down the counters, quiet for once. Then she said softly, "I wish you could see how beautiful this is." I looked at her, exhausted beyond repair, and said, "I can. I just don't agree with the definition." That night, as she slept, I sat alone on the couch, staring at the soft glow of the baby photos on her phone. Hannah and Mark had sent her ultrasound pictures, and she'd saved them all in a folder titled Miracle. I scrolled through them, trying to feel something, anger, pity, nostalgia, but all I felt was distance. Like I was watching someone else's life through a window. When the twins woke up crying around 2 a.m., I went to check on them. Sophie wandered into the hallway, half asleep, clutching her stuffed bunny. "Daddy," she mumbled, "why does Mommy's tummy have another baby if we already have us?" I froze. How do you explain surrogacy to an 8-year-old without sounding like you've lost your mind? "It's complicated," I said. "Is Mommy sick?" "No," I said, forcing a smile. "Just confused." She nodded, hugged me, and went back to bed. I stood there for a long time after that, staring at the hallway, realizing the thing I'd been avoiding for months. Our marriage wasn't just cracking, it was crumbling. And the worst part? I didn't even want to fix it anymore. That's the thing about petty behavior. It's not really about revenge, it's about survival. You start by making jokes, then you make distance, and eventually, you make peace with the fact that you've stopped caring. Lydia still thought she was doing something noble. Maybe she was. But noble doesn't pay for therapy, and it sure as hell doesn't keep love alive. By the end of month 4, my sarcasm had stopped being a shield. It had become the only honest language left in our house. And deep down, I knew the next stage wasn't going to be petty. It was going to be permanent. If you thought the baby shower was peak chaos, buckle up, because Chapter 6 of this marital meltdown is titled Everyone Loses Their Damn Minds. By month 5, the pregnancy hormones had gone from background noise to main event, and Lydia was crying over everything. Commercials, cereal boxes, the way I buttered toast too aggressively. I wasn't even trying to be mean anymore. It just happened naturally, like breathing. Then her parents decided to re-enter the picture like 2 uninvited sequels no one asked for. The phone call came on a Thursday night. I was in the garage pretending to fix a shelf that had been broken since 2019 when my phone buzzed. It was Sandra, my mother-in-law, queen of unsolicited wisdom. I stared at her name for a full minute, debating if I had the emotional stamina for this conversation. Spoiler, I didn't. But curiosity won. I answered anyway. "Grant," she began, voice dripping with righteous fury. "I just got off the phone with Lydia, and I am disgusted." "Join the club," I said. "We meet Thursdays." She ignored me. "She's being selfless, and you're being cruel. I didn't raise her to be married to a man who mocks her for doing good." "Well," I said, "I didn't marry her thinking she'd turn into a walking GoFundMe for her sister's fertility issues." She gasped so loudly I thought she'd swallowed her pearls. "You should be ashamed." "Oh, I am," I said, "just not for the reasons you think." Then she went full soap opera. "One day, you'll regret this attitude." "Ma'am," I said calmly, "I already regret meeting your daughter." Click. Call ended. That woman hung up so hard my phone battery dropped 5%. 5 minutes later, her husband, Frank, called. Apparently, they tag team now. "Son," he said, his voice low and serious, "you need to get your act together." "You mean the act where I pretend to be supportive while losing my mind?" "Don't get smart with me." "Sir," I said, "that ship sailed the day your daughter signed up to carry her brother-in-law's baby." Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "You're lucky I'm not there right now." "No," I said. "You're lucky you're not." He hung up too. And just like that, I'd completed the in-law double feature, both offended in under 10 minutes. New record. When Lydia came home that night, she was fuming. "What did you say to my parents?" "Nothing that wasn't true," I said. "They called me, remember?" "They're upset." "Good," I said. "Maybe they'll stop showing up unannounced like Jehovah's Witnesses with casseroles." "You're impossible." "No," I said, "I'm consistent." She went upstairs, slammed the bedroom door, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't follow her. I poured a whiskey instead and toasted to my own survival. That was becoming my nightly routine. 1 glass for each bad decision we'd made since she said the words, "I'm going to be a surrogate." I was up to 7 glasses a week. The next morning, she came downstairs pretending like everything was fine. That's how Lydia coped. Denial through domestic chores. She was folding laundry like she was auditioning for a commercial when she said, "Can you help me carry these groceries later?" I looked up from my coffee. Why not call Hannah or Mark? They should be good at carrying things. They carried this mess right into our marriage. Her lips tightened. "You're being cruel again." "No," I said. "I'm being accurate." She set down the laundry basket, tears already building. "Why can't you just support me through this? It's almost over." "Almost over." I laughed. "Lydia, you're halfway through turning our lives into a reality show. This isn't a cold. It doesn't just go away with fluids and rest. You're making everything about you." "Well, someone has to," I said. "Because you sure haven't." She stormed out, leaving her car keys on the counter. I figured she'd gone to Hannah's again, her emotional escape hatch. That's when the kids wandered in, still in pajamas, asking, "Where's Mom?" I sighed. Probably saving the world again. "Will she be back for dinner?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "She always comes back for dinner. She just doesn't always bring peace with her." Later that day, my lawyer friend Tom called. "You sound like a man teetering between enlightenment and homicide," he said. "Both sound relaxing," I replied. "How's the documentation going?" "Flawless," I said. "I've got receipts, photos, and a spreadsheet so detailed it could win a Pulitzer." He laughed. Good. Keep it up. You're gonna need it when this explodes. When? I asked. Buddy, he said, you're already in the blast zone. That night, Lydia came home late. She looked exhausted, hair messy, face pale, one hand on her lower back like she'd been carrying the weight of bad decisions all day. Rough day at the clinic? I asked. She didn't answer, just went straight to the kitchen and started cooking in silence. I watched her for a while, and for a brief moment, I felt bad. Like genuinely bad. Maybe she really did think she was doing something good. Maybe she thought she was helping her sister, not destroying us. But then I remembered how she'd shut me out of every decision, how she'd spent our money, how she'd smiled through my humiliation, and that sympathy vanished faster than my 401k in a recession. We ate dinner in silence. The twins talked about school, Sophie discussed her art project, and Lydia pretended the tension was just another ingredient in the stew. After dinner, she started clearing the plates, and I said, "Leave it. I'll handle it." She looked surprised. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't thank me," I said. "It's not kindness. It's self-preservation." She didn't say anything after that, just went upstairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the sound of the dishwasher grinding away at my last nerve. A few days later, the in-law backlash leveled up. I came home to find Sandra sitting in my living room, again, with a plate of cookies and that fake sweet smile that hides 1,000 insults. "We need to talk," she said. "Correction," I said. "You need to talk, and I need to drink." "Don't be rude," she said. "I'm trying to help. You can help by leaving." "Grant," she said, her tone sharp, "you're destroying this family." I laughed. "Lady, this family came pre-destroyed. I'm just narrating the wreckage." She glared at me, stood up, and said, "You'll regret this." "Probably," I said, "but not as much as Lydia's going to regret letting her sister's husband put her through morning sickness." She gasped, clutched her pearls, and stormed out. The dog followed her to the door. Traitor. When Lydia got home and found out, she cried for an hour. I didn't have the energy to care. "You're turning everyone against me," she sobbed. "Correction," I said. "You're doing that. I'm just letting them know the Wi-Fi password for group discussions." "You're heartless." "You keep saying that," I said. "Maybe one day it'll stop sounding like a compliment." She grabbed her car keys again. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Away from you," she snapped. "Perfect," I said. "Bring peace home as a souvenir." She slammed the door, and I swear, the echoes sounded like applause. For the next week, we barely spoke. When we did, it was logistics, kids, bills, groceries. She'd leave early, come home late. I'd sleep in the guest room, watch reruns of sitcoms where the husbands were miserable, but at least the laugh track made it bearable. Then one evening, she came home crying again. "You told your coworkers, didn't you?" "Depends," I said. "What's the charge, defamation or honesty?" "They're gossiping about me." "They were already gossiping," I said. "Now they just have better material." She glared at me through tears. "You've turned into someone cruel, Grant." "And you," I said, "turned into someone I don't recognize." "Fair trade." She sank into a chair, clutching her stomach, crying quietly. For a split second, I wanted to reach out. But I couldn't. It wasn't anger anymore. It was numbness. You can't comfort someone who lit the fire and then acts shocked when it's warm. That's when she said it. The line that made me realize just how far gone we were. "I thought marriage meant unconditional love," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "But even unconditional has a clause for stupidity." She sobbed harder. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and said, "I'm going for a drive." I didn't actually go anywhere far, just parked 2 blocks down and sat there, staring at the dashboard, wondering when my life turned into an after-school special about boundaries. My phone buzzed. Tom again. "You alive?" "Barely," I said. "She's crying again." "Crying is fine," he said. "Just make sure she's not crying to a lawyer yet." "You think she will?" "If her parents have anything to do with it, yes." "Good," I said. "Then we'll finally stop pretending." When I got home, Lydia was asleep on the couch, still holding a tissue. I watched her for a minute. There she was, the woman I'd married, the mother of my kids, the one who used to laugh at my stupid jokes. And yet, I felt nothing but exhaustion. That's when it hit me. Love doesn't always end with a bang. Sometimes, it just gets buried under too many "I told you so's." I covered her with a blanket, turned off the lights, and went upstairs. The silence was heavy, but peaceful in its own way. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. And in that moment, one quiet truth settled in my chest like cement. She could beg, her parents could blame, but I wasn't bending anymore. Whatever this marriage was before, it wasn't anymore. It happened at 2:03 a.m. Because of course it did. Bad news and screaming babies always wait until decent people are asleep. I was halfway through a dream about winning the lottery and moving to a quiet island where no one says the word surrogacy, when loud banging on the bedroom door yanked me back into reality. "Grant, wake up." Lydia's voice was trembling, panicked. My first thought, fire. My second, alien invasion. My third, and sadly, the correct one, was, oh God, it's happening. I sat up, squinting through the darkness. "What?" I croaked, voice thick with sleep and resentment. "My water broke," she yelled. "Call an ambulance." I blinked at her, half awake, half annoyed. "Congratulations," I said flatly. "Call an Uber." She gasped like I'd suggested we name the baby Voldemort. "Grant, please," she shouted, doubled over, clutching her stomach. I grabbed my phone, looked at her, and said the most honest sentence I'd spoken all year. "Not my baby, not my problem. Before you judge me, let me explain something." I had reached emotional bankruptcy. This wasn't just a pregnancy. It was the culmination of 6 months of gaslighting, humiliation, and moral hostage-taking. I'd been treated like a background actor in a drama I never auditioned for, and now I was supposed to suddenly become the supportive husband again? Nope. I was done being the unpaid Uber driver of bad decisions. She groaned, half in pain, half in outrage. "You can't be serious right now." "Serious?" I said, throwing the covers off. "Lydia, I haven't been not serious since the day you decided to carry your brother-in-law's kid. I told you I wouldn't be part of this circus. And guess what? Ringling Brothers doesn't do house calls anymore." She leaned against the wall, tears forming in her eyes. "I need help." "Then call Mark," I said. "This is literally his DNA on the line." She screamed, not from contractions, but from fury. "You're a monster." "I've been called worse," I said, walking past her toward the door. "By you, actually." She fumbled for her phone, muttering curse words I hadn't heard since our first fight about whose turn it was to do laundry. I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching her dial 911 with shaking hands. "Hi. Yes, I think I'm in labor." "No, my husband won't help me," she told the dispatcher, throwing a daggered look my way. I gave her a lazy salute. "Tell them to bring popcorn. This one's gonna be dramatic." Within minutes, I could hear the faint sound of sirens approaching, growing louder by the second. Red and blue lights flickered through the blinds, painting the living room in chaos-colored stripes. The twins woke up crying. Sophie came out rubbing her eyes, and I stood there thinking, this is exactly how I imagined family life in hell. When the paramedics rushed in, I pointed them upstairs. "She's right there," I said. One of them looked at me like I was Satan himself. "Aren't you coming?" "Nope," I said. "I'm good right here. But hey, thanks for your service." Lydia screamed again as they helped her down the stairs, one arm around her, one holding medical gear. "You can't just stay here," she yelled. "Watch me," I said, leaning against the banister. "I'll text Mark to meet you at the hospital." And I did. For words, no punctuation, your kid's in a hurry. Then I put my phone face down on the counter, grabbed a glass of water, and sat on the couch like I was watching a rerun of my own downfall. When the ambulance pulled away, I sat there in silence, the kind that hums in your ears when you've crossed the line between anger and peace. The house was still, except for the faint tick of the clock and the occasional sniffle from Sophie upstairs. Part of me felt guilty, but only the small, dusty part that still remembered how we used to be. The rest of me? Relieved. Because for the first time in months, the chaos had literally rolled out of the driveway. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the sun was sneaking through the curtains. My phone had 27 missed calls and 13 texts, half from Lydia, half from her parents, one from Mark that just said, "It's happening." I stared at that message for a long minute, then deleted it. Didn't reply. Didn't need to. My part in this melodrama was officially over. I went about my morning like nothing happened. Made coffee, toasted bread, even took the kids to school. When one of the teachers asked, "Excited about the new edition?" I said, "Oh, you have no idea." Then I drove to work, parked in my usual spot, and stared at the steering wheel for a solid 10 minutes. It's a weird feeling when the woman you once loved more than anything in the world is delivering another man's baby while you're trying to remember your Outlook password. At lunch, Darren asked, "So, how's Lydia?" I took a sip of my coffee and said, dilated. He choked on his sandwich. "Oh wow, so you're a dad again." "Not even close," I said. "I'm just a bystander at this point." He gave me that pitying look people give when they don't know whether to hug you or run. "Man, that's rough." "It's peaceful," I said. "Weirdly peaceful." By evening, the texts had slowed down, replaced by one final message. "It's a boy. No name. No thanks. No invitation. Just a fact, like a weather report." I stared at it for a while, then put the phone away, opened a beer, and turned on the TV. Some people would have cried, maybe prayed. I just watched reruns of Seinfeld and laughed at jokes about nothing. Because that's what my life had become. Nothing. Around midnight, the house was quiet again. The kids were asleep, the dog was snoring, and I was finally starting to unwind when my phone buzzed once more. This time it was Tom. "You here?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. She had it. "You okay?" "Define okay." He sighed. "You sound calm." "Too calm." "That's called acceptance," I said. "It's what happens when you stop fighting a storm and start letting it drown everything." There was a long pause on the line. "You're gonna have to talk to her eventually," Tom said. "Why?" "Because you've still got kids together. Because you're human. Because closure exists." "Closure?" I laughed. "Tom, I passed closure 6 exits ago." The next morning, I got the official update through the grapevine. Lydia's parents posted on Facebook, "Welcome to the world, baby Gabriel. A miracle born through love and sacrifice." The post had 482 likes and one angry react, mine. Underneath, Mark had commented, "Couldn't have done it without you, Lydia." I commented right below him, "You really shouldn't have." It got deleted within 10 minutes. Apparently, honesty isn't algorithm friendly. That weekend, she came home. I heard the car pull into the driveway and braced myself. The door opened slowly, and there she was, pale, tired, holding her hospital bag like a war souvenir. She didn't look at me when she walked in, just went straight upstairs. I stayed on the couch, pretending to scroll through emails. About 20 minutes later, she came back down, eyes red, voice small. "You didn't come," she said quietly. "You really didn't come." I looked at her and said, "You didn't invite me." Her lip trembled. I was scared. "So was I said. "Difference is, I faced mine 6 months ago." She started crying again, softly, like someone who'd finally realized the damage couldn't be undone. "It's a boy," she said. "I know. He's beautiful. Most newborns look like potatoes, but sure," I said. That earned me a glare. "You're still cruel." "No," I said. "I'm honest." Cruelty would have been pretending to care. She wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "I called your name. At the hospital. When it got bad." "You called a lot of names, Lydia," I said. Mine just stopped answering. She stood there for a moment, looking at me like she was waiting for something. A crack in my armor, a flicker of regret. There wasn't one. I'd run out of feelings the night the ambulance took her away. "I don't know what to do now," she whispered. "Try living with your choices," I said, finishing my beer. She walked to the door, paused, and said, "You'll never forgive me, will you?" I smiled faintly. "Forgive you? I'm grateful, Lydia." "Grateful?" she repeated, stunned. "Yeah," I said. "You saved me from spending another decade believing we were solid. Turns out, you just had good timing." She left without another word. I watched her car pull away, the taillights fading down the street. Then I looked around the living room. The same living room that had hosted her sister's tears, her parents' lectures, and Mark's awkward smiles. It was empty now. Peaceful. Too peaceful. I turned off the lights, went upstairs, and lay down on the bed that suddenly felt twice as big and twice as cold. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the villain. I felt like the survivor of a war I never enlisted in. And as I closed my eyes, I thought about that hospital, about the baby with someone else's DNA, about the woman who used to be my home but turned into a stranger. Then I whispered to myself, just loud enough to hear it in the dark, "Not my baby. Not my problem." It wasn't bitterness anymore. It was relief. Because for the first time in a long, miserable year, I finally slept like a free man. A week. That's all the peace I got. 7 glorious days of quiet, clean countertops, and nights where the only crying in the house was from the neighbor's cat. 7 days without the sound of Lydia's moral superiority echoing off the walls. 7 days where I could eat cold pizza in my boxers and not feel judged by someone pretending to be the Virgin Mary of suburbia. Then, because the universe loves to ruin good moods, she came back. It was a Saturday morning. I was making pancakes for the kids, feeling like a semi-functional single dad hero, when I heard the front door open. The sound froze me mid-flip. I turned, spatula in hand, and there she was, Lydia, standing in the doorway with a baby in her arms. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. "You came home with it." She glared. "His name is Gabriel." "Cool," I said. "Still not mine." She rolled her eyes and stepped inside like she hadn't set fire to my peace. "Hannah's recovering from surgery," she said. "I'm just keeping him here for a few weeks." "A few weeks?" I repeated. "You're bringing the evidence of our marital collapse into the house for a few weeks?" She frowned. "Don't be dramatic." "Oh, I'm way past dramatic," I said. "I'm in the sequel phase of my villain origin story." The kids came running in, of course, because the universe doesn't give you privacy when your life is imploding. "Mom," Sophie yelled, hugging her leg. "You're home." Then she noticed the baby. "Whose baby is that?" Lydia smiled, all soft and motherly. "This is baby Gabriel. I'm helping take care of him for Aunt Hannah." Sophie tilted her head. "But you already take care of us." I smiled proudly at her. "Exactly, kiddo. Let's not overload Mommy's to-do list." Lydia shot me a glare sharp enough to peel paint. "Can we not do this in front of the children?" "Sure," I said, flipping a pancake. "Let's wait until they're asleep so I can scream into a pillow instead." She sighed and walked to the couch, cradling the baby. I watched her rock him gently, humming the same tune she used to sing to our twins when they were newborns. And for a moment, just one stupid, microscopic moment, I felt something weird. Pity maybe, or nostalgia for the version of us that used to be normal. Then Gabriel started crying, loud enough to wake the dead, and that feeling evaporated like my last shred of patience. The next few days were torture. Every hour was baby chaos. Crying at 2 a.m., bottles everywhere, burp cloths draped over furniture like crime scene tape. Lydia acted like this was totally fine. "It's just temporary," she said, every single day. Temporary apparently meant until my sanity files for custody. She'd walk around the house in her robe, hair messy, talking in that soothing mom voice again. "It's okay, Gabriel. Aunt Lydia's here." Meanwhile, I'd be standing in the kitchen muttering, "Uncle Grant's considering witness protection." I tried escaping it. Went to the gym. Took the kids out for ice cream. Sat in the car outside Home Depot for 45 minutes, just breathing the freedom-infused air conditioning. But no matter how far I went, I always came home to the same soundtrack: crying, cooing, and Lydia's tired sighs. Then came the part where she started asking for help. "Can you hold him for a minute?" she asked one night. "Nope," I said, without hesitation. "Come on, Grant. Just for a second." "Lydia, the last time I held a baby that wasn't mine, it was during a baptism, and even then I asked for gloves." "You're unbelievable." "Correct," I said. Finally, something we agree on. The in-laws, naturally, couldn't resist inserting themselves again. Sandra showed up unannounced, as usual, arms full of baby gifts and judgment. "He's beautiful," she said, looking at the baby. Then she turned to me. "You should be proud, Grant." "Of what?" I asked. "The world's worst decision?" "Because sure, I'll get that printed on a mug." She scowled. "You're heartless." "So I've heard," I said. "You're all very consistent." Even Frank joined in, calling me one evening. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said. "A real man would have stood by his wife through this." "A real man," I replied, "would have been consulted before his wife joined the Surrogate Olympics." Click. Another hang-up. They were getting good at those. Meanwhile, the neighbors started noticing too. Mrs. Whitmore spotted me taking out the trash one morning and called across the lawn. "Congratulations, Grandpa." I blinked. "Excuse me." "I saw the baby," she said. "He's adorable." "Not mine," I yelled back. She smiled knowingly. "Oh, I understand. Surrogacy. So modern." "Yeah," I said. "It's like a science project with tears." By the second week, I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. The house wasn't a home. It was a nursery run by denial. Every time I looked at Lydia rocking that baby, I felt my chest tighten, not from sadness, but from claustrophobia. I wanted my space back. My peace. My damn couch. So I did what any rational man on the edge would do. I booked a hotel room. I'll be gone for a few days, I told her one morning, tossing clothes into a duffel bag. She blinked. You're leaving? No. I'm taking a field trip, I said. Yeah, I'm leaving. What about the kids? They're staying here. You've already got one extra. Might as well go for the full set. You can't just run away from your problems, she shouted. I'm not running, I said, zipping the bag. I'm walking away calmly before I start throwing furniture. I made it as far as the driveway before stopping. Because as much as I wanted to leave, I couldn't. The kids were still asleep inside, blissfully unaware that their parents were starring in a live-action tragedy. I sighed, turned around, and went back in. Lydia looked surprised when I dropped the bag by the door. Changed your mind? She asked. Yeah, I said. You don't get the house and the moral high ground. So I stayed. But I didn't help. Not once. Every time Gabriel cried, I turned up the TV. Every time Lydia begged, I found something to fix in the garage. Every time her parents called, I put my phone on airplane mode and poured another drink. I wasn't angry anymore. I was indifferent. And indifference, my friend, is the most terrifying kind of peace. Then one night, the crying wouldn't stop. Hours of it. Lydia was exhausted, sitting on the edge of the bed, bouncing the baby, tears streaming down her face. Please, she said softly, just hold him for a minute. I looked at her, at the baby, and then back at the TV. You made your bed, Lydia. Literally, you incubated it. She sobbed harder. I didn't move. The next morning, her parents came over again. Sandra went full scorched earth. You're a monster, she screamed. How can you sit here while your wife suffers? Easily, I said, sipping coffee. It's called consequence. Frank pointed a finger at me. You've lost all compassion. No, I said. I just stopped renting it out. They left after 10 minutes, muttering something about praying for me. I told them to add themselves to the list. Days blurred after that. Baby screams. Lydia's tears. My silence. The house had turned into a battlefield of avoidance. Every night, she'd cry herself to sleep, and I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering how two people who once shared everything could now share nothing but resentment. Then, out of nowhere, came the breaking point. Sandra posted another Facebook update. So proud of our Lydia for giving the gift of life. Some men will never understand true strength. Tagged. With my name. My phone blew up instantly. Coworkers texting, you good, man? Old friends messaging, dude, what the hell? I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my drink. Some men, I muttered, prefer their wives not to be part-time miracle machines. When Lydia saw it, she confronted me. Why did you comment that? Because sarcasm's my love language. You're humiliating me. Correction, I said. You humiliated yourself. I'm just providing subtitles. That was it. She broke down. Full ugly cry, shaking, hands on her knees. I can't do this anymore, she said. Then don't, I replied. You think this is easy for me? Oh, I think it's very easy for you, I said. You got applause, sympathy, and a halo. I got insomnia. She stared at me for a long time before whispering, You've become cruel. No, I said. I've become free. That night, after she finally passed out, I stood in the living room staring at the baby monitor on the counter. It was quiet for once. No crying, no screaming, just soft breathing from the other room. I picked it up, stared at the tiny blinking light, and thought about how this one decision had turned my entire life upside down. Then I set it down, turned off the lights, and whispered to no one, This ends soon. Because it had to. If divorce court had a laugh track, my case would have been a sitcom. The kind where the audience claps nervously because they're not sure if it's funny or tragic. The day finally came. Months of Cold War, sleepless nights, and baby-related PTSD boiled down to a Tuesday morning hearing in a courthouse that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and crushed dreams. I walked in wearing my best, I'm totally fine suit. Navy blue, slightly wrinkled, with a tie that screamed, Please, God, let me win. Lydia was already there, sitting at the opposite table, tissues in hand, face pale but perfectly tragic. She'd clearly practiced that sympathetic martyr expression in the mirror. Her lawyer, a woman named Patricia Howe, looked like she ate men like me for breakfast, glasses, bun so tight it probably had its own bar license, eyes sharp enough to cut through marital illusions. My lawyer, Tom, looked relaxed. Too relaxed. Don't worry, he said as I sat down. We've got this. You say that, I whispered. But you said the same thing before you convinced me to buy crypto. The judge entered, a middle-aged woman with a face that said she'd heard every excuse, every sob story, every he cheated / she cheated variation in existence. She adjusted her glasses, looked at the paperwork, then at us, and said, "Let's make this efficient." My favorite phrase. I could have kissed her. Patricia stood first, of course. She walked to the podium like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not about betrayal. It's about compassion misunderstood. My client, Lydia Miller, made a selfless decision to help her sister have a child. Her husband, instead of offering support, chose cruelty, humiliation, and abandonment. She turned to gesture at me dramatically. He left her alone during labor. He mocked her in front of family. He publicly shamed her online." The judge raised an eyebrow and turned to Tom. "Mr. Ross, your response?" Tom smiled like a man who'd been waiting all week for this. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "this case is about compassion, but not Lydia's. My client has been the victim of emotional and financial deceit. Mrs. Miller not only concealed her surrogacy plans, she forged his signature on consent forms, drained joint funds for fertility treatments, and used his home as an unpaid maternity ward for another man's child." He slid a file across the table. "We have receipts." Literally. The judge flipped through the papers, frown deepening. "Forged signature?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Tom said, handing her a photocopy. "Compare that to my client's actual signature." The judge studied both, then looked up at Lydia. "Mrs. Miller, did you forge this?" Lydia dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I had to. He wouldn't support me." "That's not an excuse," the judge said sharply. "That's fraud. If I'd had popcorn, I'd have eaten it right there." Patricia jumped in to salvage it. "Your Honor, this was a desperate act made in emotional distress and financial deception," Tom added. "We also have proof she withdrew funds from their joint account for medical costs without consent." He handed over another document. Patricia glared. "Your Honor, the funds were used for a family cause." "A family cause?" I said under my breath. "Which family? Because it sure wasn't mine." The judge shot me a warning glance. "Mr. Miller, please refrain from commentary." "Yes, Your Honor," I said, sitting back, though I couldn't stop the grin. Patricia tried to steer the sympathy ship back on course. "Your Honor, Lydia has been subjected to ridicule and emotional cruelty. He refused to help her during pregnancy, abandoned her at the hospital, and made her feel unsafe." The judge nodded slowly, scribbling notes. "Do you have evidence?" Patricia blinked. "Evidence? Texts, witnesses, photos?" "Well, no, but then it's an opinion," the judge said flatly. "And opinions don't win cases. I swear, if I'd had theme music, it would have been playing right then." Tom stood again. "Your Honor, if I may add, my client documented months of communication, receipts, and correspondence showing Mrs. Miller's ongoing collaboration with her sister and brother-in-law, excluding him from major financial and personal decisions." He pulled out another folder thicker than a phone book. "We also have statements from neighbors who witnessed arguments about this issue." "You got Mrs. Whitmore to testify?" I whispered. "She loves gossip." Tom smirked. "Exactly." Lydia's lawyer tried to pivot. "Your Honor, regardless of financial disputes, Mrs. Miller's intention was pure. She did this for love." The judge's pen froze mid-note. She looked up slowly. "Love of who?" Patricia hesitated. "Her family." The judge arched a brow. "Because from where I sit, this looks like the opposite of love. It's recklessness disguised as morality." I leaned toward Tom and whispered, "If I ever remarry, I want her to officiate." He elbowed me. "Focus." Then came the part I'd been waiting for. The money. The big question, who pays for the mess? Patricia went first, arguing Lydia deserved compensation for emotional trauma. I almost laughed. The only trauma she had was the one she caused. He left her alone during recovery. Patricia exclaimed dramatically. The judge glanced at her notes. "Because she told him it wasn't his baby." Patricia hesitated. "Well, yes, but case dismissed on that point," the judge said. I nearly clapped. Tom stood again, calm as ever. "Your Honor, we are requesting the following: full custody of the children, retention of the family home, and repayment of misused joint funds totaling $28,400. Lydia gasped. That's ridiculous. The judge looked at her. Did you spend that money? Yes, but then it's not ridiculous, she said. It was beautiful. A courtroom symphony of accountability. Lydia's face went pale as the judge read her notes out loud. The court finds Mrs. Miller acted independently, dishonestly, and recklessly, causing significant emotional and financial harm to her spouse. Therefore, the court rules as follows. No spousal support. Lydia's jaw dropped. What? No spousal support, the judge repeated. Repayment of misused funds. Custody of minor children granted to Mr. Miller. And the house remains his sole property. For a second, everything went silent. No shuffling papers, no fake sniffles, just the sound of Lydia's perfect little world collapsing in real time. Even Tom looked surprised by how clean the win was. The judge finished signing the order and said, Mr. Miller, consider this your fresh start. Mrs. Miller, consider this your lesson. Then she stood up and walked out like a mic drop in human form. Lydia sat there frozen, tears streaking down her cheeks. I didn't gloat, not out loud anyway. Inside, I was doing backflips. Patricia leaned in, whispering to her client, who just kept staring at the floor. Mark and Hannah weren't there, of course. Probably too busy taking baby photos and pretending they hadn't detonated my marriage. As we walked out, Tom clapped me on the back. You did it, man. You actually did it. No, I said, grinning. We did it. You argued. I suffered, and karma took attendance. You're free, he said. How's it feel? I paused, watching Lydia through the glass doors as she stood outside, still crying, her parents hovering nearby. Feels like breathing after holding it for a year, I said. I should have walked away then. But because I'm human, and apparently still dumb, I approached her one last time. She looked up, eyes red, voice shaking. Was this worth it to you? You mean not being treated like an emotional ATM? Yeah, I said. It was. I just wanted to help, she whispered. I nodded. And now you helped yourself right out of a marriage. She winced, like my words were physical blows. You're cruel. No, I said. You just keep mistaking boundaries for cruelty. Sandra appeared behind her, glaring at me like she was 2 seconds from casting a curse. You should be ashamed, she said. For what? I asked. Winning fairly? I'll send you my lawyer's number. He works miracles. You'll burn in hell for this, she hissed. If it's quiet, I said, sign me up. I walked away before she could reply. Outside, the sun hit my face, warm and clean, like the world had finally decided to stop spitting on me. Tom handed me a copy of the ruling, still crisp and official. Frame it, he said, or at least keep it somewhere you'll see it when you start doubting yourself. Oh, I'm framing it, I said, right next to my coffee maker. On the way to my car, I stopped by a vending machine, bought a soda, and toasted to my own damn freedom. It wasn't champagne, but it tasted better than anything I'd had in months. As I sipped it, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the tears, the endless arguments, and realized I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. Completely, gloriously done. When I got home, the kids were in the backyard with my mom, laughing. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't sound forced. For the first time in a year, my house actually felt like home again. No baby cries, no judgment, no awkward moral lectures, just peace. That night, I tucked the twins into bed, kissed Sophie goodnight, and poured myself one final glass of whiskey. I sat on the porch, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "It's over." Then, for the first time in a long time, I actually believed it. Because justice may move slow, but when it finally arrives, it shows up dressed like a judge with my last name on the winning side. Months later, peace didn't feel like silence. It felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for a year. The kids were laughing again, the house was mine again, and my coffee tasted less like stress and more like victory. Lydia texted sometimes, little guilt trips disguised as apologies. I regret everything. I'd reply with a thumbs up emoji. Nothing says closure like minimal effort. Through the grapevine, I heard that Hannah and Mark's fairy tale cracked faster than a dollar store mirror, medical bills, fights, therapy posts on Facebook. Karma didn't miss. One night, Sophie asked, "Dad, why did Mom have a baby for Aunt Hannah?" I smiled. Because she didn't read the fine print on marriage, kiddo. Always check the terms before signing up for crazy. I wasn't bitter anymore, just wiser. I'd learned that peace doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from freedom. And freedom looks like your own couch, your own quiet, your own rules. Lydia once said, "It's my body, my choice." She was right. And now it's my heart, my peace, and my Netflix account, none of which include her. Not my baby, not my problem. And for once, that felt exactly like freedom.